Once in a blue moon, a new band comes along with a new look and a new sound to usher in a new era. And in 1981, that band was Duran Duran, and from their first album, the instrumental epic Tel Aviv. Bit of sequencer right there. Already the Tangerine Dream influence is quite evident. Hear those layers right there. I think we could have some ebo guitar mixed with some phasing, mixed with some strings. Those violins, that string section doesn't seem to be credited. I'm going to have to look that up. The orchestral backing, the slight or the string section backing doesn't seem to be credited, but it's nonetheless they're in tandem with their producer Colin Thurston. They've worked up quite a maximalist, quasi symphonic slash electronic sound here. That sequence right there kind of reminds me of like the sequencer-driven figure in I think in Kling Klang by Kraftwerk. Hear how those violins just kind of dart in and create all these like waves of tonality. That rising part right there, no, 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 and there seems to be just a slight pitch bent on a few things going on here, giving it like a hypnotic effect. The way that notes are kind of being bent, like I think on that E-bout, how they're just kind of slightly rising, slightly bending. So much like kind of like engine like sound going on, like jets. Now we got that synth kind of beaming in. that zoom. So many like jet-like sounds, engine sounds, like kind of going this way, going that way, at different volumes. Yeah, as one sound's going like zoom, another's going like. Again, I just can't even tell you what is more compelling. Is it the violin or is it, and of course you've got that rhythmic figure going the whole time, like tying it all together. But I just love the way those violins kind of like dart over everything and just almost like doing like somersaults over all these different colliding waves of sound. It's of course it's the overall like kind of pitch, kind of bendiness of the pitch that's just that recurs throughout. It really it just goes on nonstop, and that gives like kind of a hypnotic effect wherever you apply it. It's one of my favorite like studio devices of this time frame. Not used all that often, but when I hear it, I'm just transported to a different world. That what they can do with an e-bow, it's almost like they're not so much playing melodies here as they're just acting as sound technicians. In particular, Nick Rhodes, Andy Taylor, and in partner in of course in cooperation with the producer, who I think has must have had quite a bit of input here. Yeah, that's Andy Taylor on E-bow, I guess. He would play that instrument like on the first two Duran Duran albums. And I have to say, I'm not really noticing John Taylor all that much on this number. I guess he's just kind of more felt than heard here. Although John Taylor has often been cited as the most like virtuosic player in the band, but he's kind of taking a back unless he's doing something else. But the credits on all the media that I can come across are pretty bare bones. It just says like Simon Le Bon vocals, Nick Rhodes keyboard synthesizer. It doesn't give me the make or model of what he's using. Roger Taylor drums, percussion. Yeah. That's that like section right there, like the most you could say like hummable section like that. No, kind of like a recurring motive. That should have been like taken and clipped out and used like as a bumper somewhere, like on a program of some kind. I'm now hearing a bit of Simon Le Bon. Yeah, just when you were thinking, where was Simon Le Bon during all this? What was he? I wonder if Simon Le Bon if the reason why they didn't do more instrumentals, they did this and they did there was a song, there was an instrumental Tiger Tiger on Seven and the Ragged Tigers, another beautiful hypnotic trance-like instrumental that I'm gonna have to do sometime. But and both that and this make me kind of wish that they had done a few more instrumentals, maybe like, hey, three per album perhaps. Seeing them explore more of this kind of like quasi symphonic, oh, just complex like sound shaping approach. But I would imagine when you have a vocalist who's not really known much for instrumentation, other than maybe tambourine, that yeah, it's like, what was he going to do during these numbers? But I'm hearing some like kind of wordless vocals from him, or maybe it's like a sample from another song just kind of played in some strange, maybe played back. I don't know. Maybe they record him doing some moaning and then they kind of wove it into the end at like a faint volume, but it's uh the 5 minute 19-second instrumental Tel Aviv by Duran Duran from the Brummy Band's first album released in 1981, the epic album closer to that great release, and just indicative of how much ground this band could cover. The extent of their musicianship and their compositional skill and sound shaping innovation. And when they emerged, they were the band. They emerged at a crucial time because video was just taking off, and they managed to harness that opportunity more than any other act of their generation. And in doing so, they became the messengers of a new medium, and their creativity with it captured the imagination of a new generation of music goers. And the timing was doubly right in that MTV was taking off in the United States, like premiered in August of 1981, and within a year, but by late in 1982, as more markets throughout the U.S. were getting hooked up with cable, the exposure of their videos on that channel would help usher a new wave of English bands. And England, of course, had been having a hard time connecting with the United States for quite a long time. Like the new wave of the late 70s didn't really make a dent in the US, and because there was no like new medium for those band for the bands of like 77, 78 to utilize, like radio, FM radio had become pretty ossified at that point, and was just kind of looking for more of the same, more of like the pre-existing musical sounds and styles, but Duran Duran came about. Duran Duran, weren't getting airplay in the States initially, and they wouldn't have. It was video and it was MTV, and as they would later say, the as they would later observe, the parts of the United States that were hooked up with cable, the counties, the districts, and such, were the places where their albums were selling. Because radio at first wasn't playing them, and yeah, right place, right time with a band that just had it all, the complete package. A fresh new look, photogenic and stylish, um, a, an inborn knack for songwriting, and a diversity in their material. They could write, catchy vocal pop and complex instrumental pieces like that. They had a new sound, relatively new anyway, synthesizing some of their influences in a new way. Um, And of course, serving as a conduit through which some other bands that didn't quite reach manage their full reach potential, like say Japan, who came and went a bit too early for stateside success. Maybe if they had put out a 1983 album, hung in there for one more album, they could have been part of that second British invasion. But peaking between like 1978 and 1981, those were dark times as far as Atlantic crossings go. But 82, 83, finally the floodgates opened. Heck, but then again, you could say that about a lot of the bands. If the Jam had recorded one more album, had recorded an album in 1983 as a follow-up to The Gift, that album probably would have been the one to have done it in the States. Because the Jam, of course, were really popular, like in California, New York. They were popular in the big cities, but they just that big breakthrough had eluded them. I think they were one album away from it. But then, of course, Paul Weller broke up the band right before that happened, and the Style Council, great as they were a new quantity, a new name, a new brand, and in America it was kind of like starting over. And now, while they did have, while he did have the only top 30 hit of his entire career with My Ever Changing Moods with Style Council in 1984, he was still kind of like breaking up a band whose name recognition was expanding and starting over. It was kind of stepping down a few pegs in a market that he hadn't quite conquered yet. Of course, in the UK it was a different thing because Paul Weller was already well established as the voice of his generation. So he could just waltz right from the Jam to the Style Council, and the Style Council could just walk right in on top based on Paul Weller's national, name, prestige in that market. Yeah, and heck, the Clash probably would have consolidated their stateside success had Strummer and Simonon not been foolish and fired Mick Jones over showing up too late to too many rehearsals, I guess. As Strummer would later say, that kind of musical chemistry is worth waiting for, even if it means waiting 45 extra minutes for one of the guys to show up to the studio. Because that kind of chemistry is rare. Anyway, yeah, one could speculate, and pretty soon I'll do some videos like of examining the second British invasion more, as well as the New Wave more, because there's a lot to be said about those topics. For now, that was Duran Duran with Tel Aviv. To see more Rubies and Sapphires from the catalog of Duran Duran, see the directory of albums by English D artists linked in the description below. And like and subscribe, follow me on social media, and leave a comment if there are any observations you have about this piece, about its complexity, about the instrumentation involved. Maybe you have some ideas about what some of the people were doing that I couldn't pinpoint. Where were those strings coming from? What was John Taylor doing in this particular track? Heck, did Simon Le Bon actually play an instrument on this or something, or do more than I would have imagined? And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most ear-traveled trap maximalist, signing off.